Hey guys, thanks so much for joining. Today, we are doing an interview with Vonda Knox. Vonda Knox is Nate's mother. Nate was the neighbor to Chris and Shanann Watts. He's the one that captured the video of when Chris was backing in the morning of the murders. This video is from Vonda's perspective and how it affected her, her family, and the neighborhood around her. Vonda and myself had hours of conversation, and what we finally concluded was this: too much time and energy is spent on the murderers. Too often we forget about the victims and the love that they had, and how love conquers all. Shanann was a picture of that love for her daughters, Bella and Cece, and for her unborn child, Nico. Even for Chris, she had love, a deep love. So often we sit here and we argue the facts of the case. What he did, how he did it, who was involved. But who's forgotten in that? The innocent ones, the victims. Shanann, Bella, Cece, and Nico. If it's one thing that we want you to take from this video, is that the love that Shanann Watts had for her family, for Bella, for Cece, for Nico, and even for Chris. Let's not forget them. You got to have some encounters directly with the family, Shanann, Bella, Cece,
Right.
and Chris. One of the more compelling things, in my own personal opinion, the compelling piece of evidence is the way you described. Can you describe the encounter that you had with Chris?
So I was watching the dogs, and I didn't live here at the time of the murder. I moved in later, but I would come over, hang out with the family, watch my grandson, watch the dogs. So I came out one Sunday morning, and I just walked out on the porch. I was like having my coffee. Good morning, and he just gave me the coldest. He just gave me this icy stare, like I was not part of his script or part of his day, or either like, how dare you speak to me, or it was just strange, and if a person is shy, they'll be like nod or something like that. But of all the encounters I've ever had, that was just odd to me. And I even mentioned it later, and they're like, well, that's weird because he's always really nice to us. And so I just thought it was odd. And then later on, when he was in this living room watching the video and the little fetus popped up in the commercial, there was just a moment there, and he said, oh, she's pregnant. And the officer said, oh, how far along? And for one split second, he looks at the officer, and I don't know if it's a look of contempt or it was the iciest cold look.
Nothing for the rest of the day.
No, that's it. She's pregnant as well.
How far along?
14, 15 weeks.
And it just made me think of that encounter I had had with him, and it just gave me the chills. It was like, that's just odd.
And that's what, honestly, everybody on the channel has been wondering too, and everybody out there in the rest of the world. You see these videos of him being a good dad and playing with the children and those different things, and you wonder, how could he go from one extreme to the next extreme?
Right.
And maybe what you're portraying too, when you caught him off guard on the porch that day, maybe that's an encounter of what behind the scenes, the true person that he might or could have been, because maybe he was putting on that facade or that mask. And when you describe it to me, it sounds like almost as somebody who tries to play the part of somebody that they think,
Right.
This is how I'm supposed to be.
Right.
This is how I'm supposed to be. This is how everybody wants to view me. So this is what I'm going to play. And I think that just you captured the real portion of what Chris probably had somewhere deep down inside there, where you came out, it was unscripted, like you said,
Right.
and there it is.
It was just raw.
So that's very intriguing. On the other flip side of that, though, you got to see Shanann, Bella,
Yep.
and Cece.
And so I just would see Shanann out in the front yard. She'd wave hi. She was always busy running in the house, but she was always friendly. And then the girls were just lovely. So they'd play out there. Cece was a little more outgoing than Bella, but I saw them many times just out there swinging on the swings and playing, and they're always like, hi, hi. So they're
And
precious.
see, that's what I envision too. When you think about it too, I think that's a point that we often forget. We forget about Shanann's story, about Bella's story, about Cece's story. And Shanann was loving. You could see firsthand encounters of how loving she was to Bella, to Cece. And I'm sure she was very excited about Nico coming in too.
Sure.
So when you saw those, you got to see them firsthand with them playing on the swing set. And people miss that portion of it. And so we forget that there was so much love that was in there. Even though Shanann, what had happened to her came from Chris, she loved Chris too.
Sure, of course she
did.
did.
Loved Chris. And you could see that even in where they have the texts and the different things going back and forth. She wanted to be intimate with him. She wanted to try to continue to have a relationship with him. She wanted to be married and into marriage with him. And she didn't know how to fix whatever was going on that was broken. And so one thing that you see about Shanann is that she loved deep and she loved hard. And so you could see that with her kids. You could see that she tried even with Chris. So that's one thing that I want everybody to take away from that too, is that how much love that this family had prior to this happening, how much love Shanann had for her children, how much love Bella and Cece had for her parents, for Shanann, even for Chris. I know what he did, but even for the father, they still had so much love in it. And you were talking about the neighborhood too. I'm glad that you brought that up because we had talked about bringing this up. The neighborhood, I can't even fathom, because nothing like that has happened around where I've been, but how it directly affects, and you can see that, especially for you or for Betty or for whoever, like you guys are right next to it. You guys are right next to there. And it directly affects the community. And how did you see people get over that? Are they still going through it as you see? I mean, we're several years down the road. Are people still being affected to this day?
In the beginning, I think it was just exhausting, because you never knew who was driving up. You never knew. And at first, there were like the detectives and the drones, and it was just total chaos here for a while. And then people would come up, and it's like, oh, what now? What now? And so you're kind of like on edge. And then we had talked about, I'd spoken to you about one evening I went out to water the plants, and it was dark, and there was a car parked in the driveway that didn't fit. It shouldn't have been there. And I heard somebody in a male voice yell out Shanann's name and say, Shanann, Shanann. And I was like, and this was this was almost a year after it occurred. And so this person, he either thought that she was still held up in the house, or perhaps he thought her ghost was there, or I'm not sure what he thought. But it's just, those things just kind of like build up.
Yeah, that's very
And then the next morning I went out over on the porch, and there was 2 Happy Meals. So he actually left Happy Meals for Bella and Cece, with the food, cheeseburgers and french fries, thinking that they were there. And this was a year after the murder occurred. The trauma in the neighborhood, it affected the children, around here, the little kids. And you can't protect your kids from everything because other little kids talk, so you have to be upfront with them. But daddies don't kill their babies, and 6-year-olds don't understand that concept. So some of the kids were, they had separation anxiety, and some of them had night terrors, and some of them, they just couldn't sleep in their own rooms. And so they had different things. So it really did affect the entire community in ways that you can't even imagine, And like I said prior, it's difficult to forget it when it's right next door.
Yeah, it's a constant reminder.
Right, and every time you walk out the door. So, and then since I had actually seen the girls, I didn't live here at the time, I moved in later, but I would watch the pups and, take care of the house and come over and visit. And so I saw the girls swinging and playing many times, and they were the happiest little things. They're little sweethearts. And so you see that, and then you have this attachment to him. And then I did see Shanann a few times. We just waved hi. She was always busy, but very friendly. So there were so many conspiracy theories going around. There was one, that everybody had something to do with this and was in on it, and they were held up in the house, or, there were so many different things that people build in their head, and not everybody is 100% stable. So I don't know if he felt like he was going to feed them, like they weren't eating, or he wanted to lure them out of the house. But to me, that's just sad.
Yeah,
That's a really sad, that people get pulled into this kind of conspiracy theory or these topics.
So one of the biggest questions, and that everybody has in their mind too, is they talk about NK. NK, the involvement of what she had, and a lot of people feel like she was there during that day, or she had some kind of involvement. Now, when we were speaking behind the scenes, we had talked about how you were constantly either on the porch or on the patio, and you guys had been in and out, and then you had dogs too as well.
Right.
So it would have been hard for it to do. And I'd imagine you guys being a close-knit community, so you guys probably knew, who's coming, who's going, different things. So if you could explain to us, like, kind of those encounters with that, and how difficult it would have been for, for the conspiracy theorists out there that think, oh, well, maybe she just snuck around the back, or
Right. So my family was out in the front all the time, just sitting out there and getting a breath of fresh air, doing whatever they're doing. And then the dogs were out in the back, and they barked at everything. And so we would run out there, to see what was going on, because the large dog would jump as high as the fence. And so we were like, don't jump over the fence. And so we would run out there and say, okay, stop barking, stop.
Because your guys' deck, like, literally goes right here, and you guys can see the entire thing.
Yeah.
And I know before there wasn't that houses that you had behind there too.
And then so Chris knew all that.
Yeah.
He had an idea of what was occurring. He paid attention to it. I'm sure he understood. And even when Shanann and the kids were in North Carolina, he parked all the way down the street. And so he was very strategic in what he did. And I don't think Chris colored outside the lines until the event occurred. So he would he would plan it well, and he had everything done. And so to me, I'm not saying I know for sure, because I don't, but for me, that would have been almost impossible. And it would have been kind of out of his realm of how he did things to take that risk and to say, okay, let's, plan it like this. And like I said, I'm just, I don't know any more than anybody else does, but it would have been a lot to plan without anybody seeing, that occurring, or the dogs barking or anything else. It just doesn't seem likely to me. It doesn't seem logical.
And I've been here personally too myself, conducting paranormal investigations, and I will say that your neighborhood has been pretty good about keeping an eye and a watch on what's going on. Maybe because it's heightened right now, but I would assume that you guys had some sense of that going on too, because you look kind of like a close-knit community. So.
Well, this was also, and Chris even mentions it, that somebody was like breaking into cars and stuff. So everyone was on high alert, and he knew that because Nate told him where to park. So that he could watch his truck. So he had a sense, and he was already paying attention to that. So he was already looking at that. So it doesn't make sense to me that all of a sudden he would have just gone totally unscripted and said, let's do this.
When she was in North Carolina, Shanann and the kids, he parked down the street, in part probably because he didn't want her to know what time he was coming in, or he didn't want it. But he was very, very strategic and careful, because I was even privy to that conversation. I wonder why Chris is parking down the street. That's weird. And so he was very strategic in everything that he did. There's to just dismiss it and say, well, he wouldn't, have taken that into account, I don't think would be accurate. So he would know the dogs are there. This is here. This is here. And even though clearly it wasn't well planned out the way it occurred, he was still very strategic in the way that he did things around here.
Yeah, that's good. So thank you for sharing that too. I hope that helps and clears things up for people. This is a continuation of last time when we had talked. But we didn't ever get a chance to go over kind of your background,
Okay.
your history as far as education, and just what got you intrigued and interested into starting to write too.
So I actually studied religion. I studied the Bible as history and literature and as theology. And so I also embrace a lot of other different traditions. I read the Quran, the Book of Mormon, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, and I studied the Hinduism a little bit, Buddhism, Taoism. So I was really interested in all of the different traditions and the similarities with all of them. Also the more modern spiritualist instructors like Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer. I love Joe Dispenza because he gets into the science of everything, mind and body science, mind spirit science. So I've just been interested in that for a really long time. I also studied literature in college, and I actually began writing in college. So writing is my passion. I have another book before I wrote this book. And so it's kind of writing for me is you do what you love, even though sometimes that makes you crazy. But I use writing as a way to process events, and especially traumatic events. So when this occurred and my family was going through this and we had all of this trauma here, that was just a way for me to kind of process and start walking through things. Because every time I would go outside, if I'm sitting on the back porch, then I'm looking at the swing where the girls are playing, and then every time, you're not thinking about the story and you go out the front door and someone is here. And there have been hundreds and hundreds of people come by, and I'm kind of an empath and I pick up their energy and they would be in tears or taking selfies or it was just really difficult to escape this story. And I'm like some people are like puppy people or kittens, and I'm kids. I've always been the grandma, mama, kid person. And so it was crushing having seen the girls, and then understanding and knowing and wondering what that must have been like for them to go through that, as well as Shanann. And so you can't actually escape it if you live next door. And you're, because you don't want to think about it, and then people are showing up all the time. So I'm like, I don't want to drown in the sadness of this story. And so what I would like to do is just process it. And so I started asking questions, and I started, things started coming to me. I've had clairvoyant experiences my whole life. So when I felt the presence of Bella and Cece, my family was like, oh, of course you did. So, because it was just something I've just always done. So, not a medium.
You're what people would call like an empath. And I believe this is probably, in my opinion, I write music and things, so this was probably a great outlet for you to get out your emotions. We had talked a little bit behind the scenes about it too, and you were very adamant to let people know too, this is just your take on things too. It's not a new dirt about what had happened in the case or those things. These are your accounts and what you had felt like Shanann and what you had felt and you went through. It was kind of those accounts that you placed everything into here.
I did. And it was more, this book is not about Chris, it's not about the case. This book was focusing on Shanann and the unspeakable trauma that woman had to go through and had needed to process, the emotional and the psychological trauma that she would have to process, going through a horrific experience like that. And then also her experience from transitioning from the physical world into the spiritual world. And so it's about spirituality, and I say in the beginning of the book and at the end of the book, this is just my experience, this is my perception. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. As a matter of fact, I say in the beginning, it's your right and your responsibility to come up with your own opinion. And everybody has a different experience, a different background, a different, family input, and everybody's going to think of things differently, and that's okay. It's fine to do that. But this was my process of walking through this with her and saying, well, who met you and how did you feel about that? And what about the kids? And what about, and so I was kind of asking those mind questions. And then for me, the process of writing, like I said, I have clairvoyant experiences, and so like I'll get a vision, and then so like Speaks with Stars, he's my character. And I did find it a little bit interesting that people were surprised that Native American spirits were on the plains of Colorado, because I feel, yeah, I feel their presence, very strongly, as very wise, and so that was there. That was very clear and evident to me. And so then I would wake up like at 3:30 in the morning, and then I would hear this dialogue, and I'm not saying where the dialogue came from, the muse or whatever, but I would hear it. It would be very vivid, and it would go on, and then I would be like, okay, I'll write it down.
And I think it's important too that you told everybody addresses it, like you said, first thing in the portion of the book and then the last portion of the book. Look, like this is Vonda's experience. Like this was you walking through your own way to cope with what had happened too, what you felt Shanann would have wanted you to say or wanted you to portray her. And by the way, I felt like you fantastically portrayed, and I was telling you even behind the scenes,
thank you,
how Shanann was. That is exactly how I envisioned her, being strong. She was loving and she was caring, and she cared deep down, like not just on the surface. Right. Love that she had, even towards the end of the book, which we'll go over here in a little bit. Right. That I wanted to read a little. I think it's important that people know that this is your experience and what you felt like needed to be said. It is a well-written book.
Thank you.
So, in my opinion too, and I know other people have read it too, and they have told me the same thing. So
I think with books, they're very personal. Absolutely. And so you have to find what speaks to you. And so this is about the spirit life, and this is about processing, like I said, going through different processes. And it's more about that than Chris and the case. There's a plethora of material about Chris and the case, and there's a lot of speculation and stuff. And I have, I'm not saying any of that is true or not, because that was not my focus, so I'm not, that's not where I went with this.
I know some people want to know, where did you come up with the Native Americans?
So I think I've had different experiences in different locations with Native Americans, spiritually in that. But this one just kind of came to me, and I just saw Speaks with Stars, or whatever his name is, in the other realm. He was just standing there, and he was out there, and he was burning sage and had a little fire going. And then and it started coming to me. Like I said, I wake up in the middle of the night and hear this dialogue, and he and Shanann were having a conversation, and she was a little bit confused, and he was there to say, it's okay, you've got this, you aren't alone, we're going to work it out. So, and that's just kind of how it comes to me, and not all at once. It took me over 2 years to write this book, and so I would like leave it alone for a while, and then 3:30 in the morning, it's like boom, and you hear this, and you're hearing this dialogue again, and it's like, wow, okay, and sometimes it even surprises me, and it's like the character of Silver Moon, she just jumped in there, and it was like, and that just popped in, and then it turned out to be an interesting and caring character.
I like how you incorporated it with it. I just know some people were kind of curious as to how do we get to the
right.
That being in there. So I thought I'd ask that question for them. What's one of your favorite parts of your book?
My very favorite part of the book is when Shanann and Bella interact. They finally interact. And I think that's and I'm not going to give it away because that's a good part, but I think that's my favorite part.
Do you care if we read a portion out of the book?
Please.
There were some things that were very intriguing. This captured my attention. It was in the beginning of chapter 12. The sentencing had been devastating. Shanann had seen her husband handcuffed, shackled, and dressed in prison orange. That was his reality now. She saw her in-laws and her precious family all devastated by the tragic outcome of Chris's actions. Shanann needed the Earth Mother. She closed her eyes and was suddenly standing on a cliff. Speaks with Stars' favorite place. The sun was setting, and the view took her breath away. Pink and purple splashes mingled with scattered flecks of gold flittering through, soft wisps of blue weaving in between hazy billows of fluff. like, I love how you portray some of these things too. Like, just the way you did, I was like, I love this part. Mountain peaks reached up to meet the lofty canvas of color and translucent light. A gentle breeze lifted the scent of pine and wild roses. Shanann reached her arms up towards the magnificent sky. This place, this gift, the mother calmed her soul. I'll stop there. But just the way that you describe some of these locations and places is eloquently put, in my opinion. Did you imagine these places as you were writing
So
them?
I do. Those places come to me, and I get a visual of it, and then I have dabbled in language for a really long time, and so Melville is one of my very favorites because of the. He's very sophisticated, and at the same time, he's very artistic, and so
Yeah.
so the syntax is kind of like my thing, and so I just play around with it, and yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed that.
Yeah, I did. I had to bring one of those parts up because to me, I do music, and when you try to paint a picture, you try to do it as vividly as possible, and to try to find the right words and put them together. Sometimes it's a task and it's a chore because you feel you're describing it, but sometimes for me, just my personal thing, I'm like, did I describe that well enough? Did I accurately portray what I'm trying to say, the scenery here, or whatever it is that you're trying to push off? But those were one of the parts I was like, oh, I love how
Thank you. The idea of the Earth Mother, and you can read this book. You can read it literally, and you can also read it figuratively and with metaphor, and there's allegory. And so she is the mother, and she's reaching out to the Earth Mother, and so there's a continuity between all of this, and I believe that's like with the Native American tradition was so strong, because they were so connected to the earth in such a way, and then they found their strength and their sustenance from that, and so I think as Shanann, as she did her transition from the physical, she started letting go of certain things, like her furniture, and that was kind of a metaphor for this is so important. Oh, it's not.
No, it's not.
No, this is really okay. No, it's not. And the whole thing, and the scene with the cookie jar, and all of those things. And it was that was her transition, and trying to go from physical to spiritual. I just mostly wanted to say that this was a kind of an organic process for me. I didn't wake up and say, "Oh, I'm going to write a book about this murder that just happens to be next door." And anybody that thinks that you're going to get rich from writing a book, it's 0.002% people can even make a living. I have a lot of friends who are writers and artists, and nobody ever quits their day job. So it's not, it's a process. It's a total passion,
Yes, it is.
and if you don't do it, it's like a slow drip, and you have something in your mind and it's like drip, drip, drip. It's like, stop it. And so you have to actually embrace it, and you go sit down, and then you lose yourself in the writing process. But so it's more like that for me, because I've done it for a really long time, rather than just say, create.
It's an ongoing process. Same thing with music. Same thing with anything.
Sure.
But books. Anybody that I've ever come, and I have a lot of people that I talk to that are authors too as well. But it's always been a process for it. So, and just hear you say it's not just a matter of sitting down and saying, oh, hey, like you said, I'm gonna write a book about what happened next door, and I'm gonna try to get rich off of this.
Yeah.
So I want people to understand that this is not what this book is. This is not what this book is about. And it's more of a passion. It's more of an encounter of what you feel Shanann would have wanted to be said, and what you feel like. I feel like this was part closure for you too as well. Am I wrong in assuming that?
That was a huge part. And so I was going through the process, and I thought, there's so many people saying, I don't understand this. I don't know what happened. I'm so sad. I can't get over it. I can't move on. So I was like, well, I feel better now. When I look out the window, I see something different now. So it's like, well, if just, two people can read this book and feel better about this horrible situation, then that's cool. That's good. So, I thought, and then I did have friends read it and stuff, and they're like, wow, that's a blessing to me. And so it's not going to be a blessing for everybody, and some people are going to be, not understand or care for the genre. because it is more like a spiritual kind of encounter
Well, it's just
rather
like
than true
music
crime.
too. I hate to bring it back to music, but it's the same thing. I mean, touches a certain group of people.
Right.
And honestly, I think in anything, when you write a book, when you do music, you're talking to usually a specific
Sure.
genre of people.
Right.
That's what it is. So.
Yep.
Prior to this, you actually had another book. Can you tell us a little bit about the other book that you had written?
So the other book I wrote was, it's a story. It's a love story, but it's also magical realism. So there are some hard scenes in it, because it is about a woman and how she has to. She's searching for a love she can't get over, and she's trying to do that. But she was in a really. There was domestic violence in her childhood, and it was really extreme. And so she has to process that. She couldn't just leave it behind and go on, and she's, okay economically and everything, and educated, but she just had a lot of baggage from that. And so it's a novel, so it's fiction, but it really deals with the baggage that some people leave, with their kids, and how those processes and how all of that really affects people emotionally and psychologically. And you have to actually find out who you are and go through your steps. You can't sidestep all of that deep emotion that you have. And I think that touches on, a little bit in this book as well, that you can, you have to deal with your stuff. Everybody has to deal with their
They have to go
stuff.
through. Yeah, you have to face it head on.
Exactly.
and it's true, even to real life. Even outside of the book, I think it's important that we do that. But I wanted to stress to people too, to let everybody know, you had written a book prior to this even happening. So I think it's important because I don't want anybody to have the misconception that, here's Vonda, and Vonda's just writing a book off of this tragedy to try to get money or anything. No, this is something that you've always had passion for. You were writing even prior to this book happening. It just so happens that you've had experiences that came to you, as you were talking about being clairvoyant, and having those things come to you. And it's when you have those, and I'm sure you were at a certain level of trauma too, where you're like, this is how I need to cope with it, and this is how I need to deal with it too. So I just wanted to stress the importance of it. Like, look, hey, this is not what it's about. She had written a book prior to this, and this kind of came to you, and this is closure. Do you feel like you gained closure from writing this book, or do you?
The trauma was really intense, and the trauma for the neighborhood, for the family, for Chris and Shanann's families. Nobody can imagine that kind of trauma.
Absolutely.
It's ongoing, and it will never. It's always going to be there, unfortunately. But
Okay, so everybody knows that I do paranormal investigations, and I think that you happen to stumble upon my channel. How did you originally come to find Mekcee and the Paranormal True Crime channel?
So I saw that somebody was going to be parked at my house at 3:30 in the morning, and I thought, well, that was interesting. And so I watched it, and I thought, you're doing a paranormal investigation, and my book it wasn't out yet, it wasn't published, but I had written the parts that I'm going to speak about. So you were out there, and you were doing the words, your app, the words. And I was wondering, I wonder if any of the words from my book will come up. And so several did. And they were. And then I have a character in the book who is just completely overcome with emotion, and he can't escape his actions. And it was Shanann encounters him, without giving too much away. But that was the night that when you had a very emotional reaction.
Breakdown. Yeah, I had a breakdown.
And you were hearing sounds like a systematic sound, like drumming or chanting. And in my book, you were parked right by where the drumming and the chanting occurs in my story.
Wow. And
so I was like, okay, so he hasn't read the book because it's not out.
No.
So he is connecting on some level. Something is reaching out to him, or you were having some kind of experience. And so that even gave it more, that's solidified it for me to say, wow, interesting, at least, right?
And it's hard to deny some of the facts too, because you actually wrote a list down, which I'll pull out right now. You wrote a list down of relevant words that came out. Would you give me the pleasure of reading
Sure, but I
some
have
of
my
these
glasses.
to give some of your crap?
So you just mentioned attend, and then you felt a gust of wind. And I have since had experiences in my home with that same kind of feeling, the same kind of whoosh of wind.
Yeah, the wish.
Right. So I thought that was interesting. And then you said, actually it came up and it said a paranormal feature. And so I was like, well, that could be a book. That's interesting. And then you mentioned that there was a hum. And you said that one freaked me out, because you were, it was kind of freaking you out. And so the hum I took as maybe the drumming or the chanting, and I was feeling like, wow, there might be a connection. And then bracelet came up, and at that time, that meant nothing to you.
Yeah, you didn't mean anything
But
to me.
that was a really important symbolic something that occurs in the book. And one of the characters.
Yeah, we won't get, because we don't want to go over it, but it's very symbolic to what happens in here too. So, which I found funny too, because people were trying to, even when it came out, oh, there was a bracelet inside the house and things like that. But I feel like it was more so tying into what you had, because it was right along the lines of it. So
yeah, it was just kind of following the narrative of what was going on. And then you said, guys, I'm freaking out. That hum was absolutely terrifyingly loud. It was haunting. And so you kept going back to that. Did you notice right when that happened?
We're good.
We're talking about the bracelet.
Yeah.
I told you, she's the one. I'm telling you. There's going to be more from her. So, and then you mentioned choking. And he's like, guys, I'm so distracted. I can't get that out of my head. What I heard, I can't get it out of my head. Okay, and so this one really threw me, because the word ministry came up. And you were like, ministry. And you were like, I'm like shaking, guys. Oh my God, from that, phew, I need a minute. Well, in the book, there's a person who happens to be a minister. And that was right when you broke down. Because then you're like, I'm all emotional right now, almost. And then there was silence. And they're like, I'm sorry, guys, just give me a second, all right? Can you hear crying? Is what you said. Okay, and so and you'll have to read the book to find out exactly what we're talking about. And then you were just overwhelmed for a really long time, and you were actually sobbing, and you were just going on, and you're like, I didn't know what that, and you were like, I just got the overwhelming feeling of sadness. And I thought that was really interesting that occurred right when the word ministry came up. And I looked back, and I didn't catch it at the time, but my grandson and I went over it, and I'm like, wow, he gets emotional right at that moment. And so it's significant, in the book.
And I don't think everybody realizes the significance of what is happening right now too, because you and I had never met.
Okay, and so then the word ministry came up, and that one really blew my mind, because there's a character in the book, and I'm not going to give it all away, but there is a character in the book that is very emotional, and there's a process. Shanann meets a person, and he happened to be a minister. And so it kind of really blew my mind that you were having this experience, and that was when you became completely upset, you were shaking, and you became really emotional, and you were actually sobbing for quite a while. Yeah, and you had to kind of had a little meltdown as far as like the emotion that you were feeling.
Yeah, it was overwhelming.
Right, and that's what you mentioned, that, and you were like, I don't understand what's happening. This is just so crazy. And so I drew a direct correlation with my character, because you'll see if you read the book that how this is a very emotional character, and so you were kind of like, I don't know, reading it before it came out. So.
And I don't think people understand fully like how significant this really is too, because this is what originally kind of connected us together. Is your book had not even released out yet.
Nope.
So this hadn't came out. I had no chance to read it. I didn't know who you were.
Right.
And I had no idea about what was going on. And so when you came to me and you brought all these, and when we first had spoke, it was so amazing to me, because it's like everything went kind of hand in hand with what your book had. And at the time, some of the words that had came up, I couldn't pin to what was going on the case or the investigation, but it sounded more like we were picking up exactly the encounters and the things that you were going on. So the significance of it is we didn't know each other.
No, not at
You
all.
hadn't released your book,
Nope.
and yet we were picking up direct words and direct things and even characters that were in your book.
Right. And the correlation was really strong with the Native American characters. The drumming, the chanting, all of that was really strong. And there are rumors in this neighborhood that this used to be a Native American burial ground. No way to prove that. I'm not stating that as a fact, but there are mediums and people have come out and done work out here because other people have had different experiences. And so that was a really strong line for me. That's what kept coming through to me a lot, were the Native American characters, even though people wonder, they're not quite sure. But for me, it was just an obvious that they were there to meet her, and that they were strong and caring, and they were touched to the earth, and they knew how to assist her and help her. And in part, they knew how because they had been through similar things themselves, and they had traumatic and horrific experiences. And so, to me, that made perfect sense. So maybe not for everybody, but
just kind of help guide her along her spirit path.
Because if Shanann would have met, somebody that hadn't been through the same thing, it might not have had the same effect. And that's how it was, how I heard it. Like I said, I would hear this dialogue, and so when I hear things like that, it makes it, it started to make a lot of sense to me why that occurred. There is so much. I like to think of it more as a negative energy. You can think of it as evil or demonic or whatever term you use. It's the same thing. It's a really negative. And so, just projected by, even in this living room, projected by 2 million people watching the interview. And so all of that energy is there. So I just made a concerted effort to pull in the good, and do my sage and my prayers and all the things that I do to bring in good energy. And every day I get up, and instead of going over and saying, oh, what negative energy is there, I project and pull in all of the good energy. And I kind of wrapped this house and this area in a bubble, of good. And so in doing that, I've had a few things manifest, like my orbs, which we talked about. So, and that kind of makes sense to me, but it's all very positive, and I feel like it's protection for me and my family.
Which we had the first encounter, one of the first encounters I actually had when I came here was I had actually pulled out the K2 meter. I had walked around the home because you wanted to kind of know what my thought was about this. And when I had gone around there, you had shown me the different videos, you had shown me the things, and I'd also gone in there to connect it. I did not get that negative feeling. I got more of an embracing feeling, and it was warm and positive. So it wasn't that sense of dread and, oh, there's something evil here.
Right.
I just felt. So I want people to know that, this, what you've done to shun off the negative energy that comes directly from there is you've wrapped it in love and a positive light, and that's honestly what people have to do. And you showed me some pretty compelling pieces too, as far as the orbs go, which I hope that you decide to share with us someday, because they are very compelling. There's orbs that have eyes that you had seen that come directly at the camera, and you can actually see the two spots of where the eyes would come out. And some people would argue, oh, well, maybe it's dust and things. I've recorded enough videos in paranormal investigations to know the difference between dust and orbs that are coming.
Right.
They're intelligent. They move in a different fashion. They don't, really weirdly float like as if dust particles would.
Right.
So you can see the intelligent movements. These happen to have those. So I really hope that at some point you decide to share with us, because I would love to show that to the people. But to me, when I got that and I looked at that, I got more of a sense of an angel and protection over this place. And when I had seen the orb, that's immediately what I thought about, is that's got to be like an angel or something, like protecting you from the negativity that's drawn.
Well, and that's interesting because I follow a person who studies angels and entities in all different traditions, and almost every tradition has this type of being, whatever you want to call it, however you want to look at it. and he studies it, and he mentioned that, you know, you think of an angel as on the Christmas tree, and, you know, they're blonde with a six-pack, and, you know, but he said his first encounter was a round orb of light with eyes, and there's a little hint of a smile in mine.
There
And
is.
so,
There is.
and then my sister had always also had an experience in Germany with the same type thing, and she woke up and she's like, the angels are here, and she didn't remember saying it in the morning, but so I just found that interesting.
That is.
And so I'm not making claim that there are angels, but for me they are, and that's it's protective, it's loving, it's good. And so, and that just the way I feel about Shanann and the kids now, having gone through this whole process, I see them as happy and thriving and okay, and in a loving situation. I think also because her tragedy and her trauma happens so fast. You know, a lot of times you'll be in a relationship and, you know, it's ongoing and you have time to process and you get mad and but there was so much trauma for her because it was such a short period of time. And so it had to be confusing. And so she's like, she had to be up and down and all over the place. So by going in and dissecting all of her texts and stuff, I think people need to step back and take it in context and say, this woman was thrown under the bus, you know, the emotional and psychological bus, trying to figure this out. What's going on? What, you know, what am I going to do? And so all of that stuff, you know, it was just, it had to be devastating to try and process all of that.
Absolutely. So I think what I want people to take from this and from what you've brought to us too as well is the story of Shanann and Bella and Cece. Too often we get caught up in the monsters and their portion of the story,
Right.
and then we forget the victims. Isn't that weird? That is really
Right when
weird
you said
that
monster.
happened. That is the second time that's happened too. Wow. Thank you guys for watching. And if you enjoyed the content, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you're not subscribed already. And I'll see you guys on the next investigation. I wanted to send a special thank you to Vonda Knox for allowing me the opportunity to do this interview and the many countless hours that we spent to record this footage. Thank you, Vonda.